In 1453, when the walls of Constantinople finally collapsed, the screaming didn't erupt on the battlefield. It began inside the convents. Ottoman soldiers didn't just storm monasteries, they had instructions. Precise, intentional, chilling instructions about what to do with the women inside. And what unfolded in the next 3 days made execution look merciful. But that's still not the worst part. Because here's what your history books will never admit. The Ottoman Empire didn't simply conquer these nuns. They dismantled them systematically. They had 3 calculated methods designed to erase identity, break faith, and turn these women into weapons against their own people. The third method was so disturbing that modern geneticists still classify it as an early form of state-engineered breeding. And we know this because one nun survived. Sister Magdalena escaped with a manuscript so horrifying the Vatican locked it away for 4 centuries. When it resurfaced in 1821, historians were split. Half demanded it be destroyed, half insisted the world had to know. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why some truths are considered too brutal to teach. But before we go deeper into this forbidden history, Sparkles, hit subscribe, like the video, and drop a comment, because you're about to enter the parts of history textbooks refuse to touch. Sparkles. Now imagine you're a 22-year-old nun in Constantinople. You're not just a religious woman, you're educated. You read Greek, Latin, maybe even Arabic. You copy manuscripts, you practice medicine, you have connections to Byzantine nobility. Your convent isn't just a sanctuary, it's a vault of knowledge, valuables, and political refugees. 453 days, the Ottoman army surrounds your city. Cannons thunder, smoke fills the air, and every nun in your convent knows exactly what's coming. But here's what sets this siege apart from every other in medieval history. Sultan Mehmed II didn't just want your city. He wanted your identity, your lineage, your future children. The Ottomans had perfected a system called devshirme, the child levy. For decades they'd taken Christian boys, converted them, and forged them into elite janissaries, loyal only to the Sultan. Now imagine applying that same system not to boys, but to educated Christian women. Women who could read. Women who could teach. Women who could raise the next generation of Ottoman elites. Constantinople had over 200 convents. Thousands of nuns. Each one politically valuable. And what happened in the first 72 hours after the city fell created a policy that would haunt Christian Europe for the next 2 centuries. May 29, 1453. 5 a.m. The walls break. The Sultan makes an announcement recorded in his own victory decree. For exactly 3 days the city belongs to his soldiers. Everything inside is theirs: property, gold, books, and people. The Byzantine chronicler Ados saw it firsthand. He wrote that the convent raids weren't chaotic, they were organized. Soldiers carried lists showing which convents held the most educated nuns, the most noble-born sisters, the youngest novices. Now place yourself there. You're hiding in a convent cellar. You hear boots above you. You hear your abbess cry out. You hear doors being smashed open. And when they find you, they don't kill you. They offer you a choice, one designed to break you long before you're removed from the building. Option 1, immediate execution. Quick, almost merciful. Historians estimate around 15 to 20% chose this. Option 2, forced marriage to soldiers, instant conversion, instant consummation. Over 1,000 nuns were taken this way in just the first 3 days. But the darkest part? Many of these soldiers were once Christian boys, taken through devshirme, reshaped, and returned as enforcers of the empire. The psychological warfare becomes cyclical. Option 3, imperial service. Sounds elegant, almost dignified. It wasn't. This was the category reserved for the most educated nuns, women under 30 who could teach, instruct, and be reshaped into state assets. And those women would soon face method 2. When Sister Magdalena finally documented it in her hidden manuscript, she didn't call it captivity. She called it the stealing of the soul. And what happened inside those palace walls shattered everything these women believed about their own bodies. Imagine this becoming your new reality. Your habit is taken from you. Your hair you have never shown to the world, is exposed, perfumed, styled. They dress you in silk. They force you to speak Ottoman Turkish. They erase your Christian name and replace it with one you've never heard before. Welcome to the imperial harem. But you're not a concubine. You're something far more terrifying. Top copy palace archives, real Ottoman records uncovered in the 1920s, revealed a truth historians couldn't believe at first. Educated Christian nuns were intentionally recruited as tutors and cultural mediators inside the harem. What? Because they could train other captured Christian girls how to survive, how to convert, how to surrender to a new identity. The empire didn't just break nuns. It weaponized them. Venetian diplomatic letters from 1454, barely a year after the conquest, carried horror stories back to Europe. Nuns teaching captured Polish girls how to pray toward Mecca. Nuns instructing daughters of Hungarian nobles how to serve Ottoman officials. Nuns coaching Balkan peasant girls on how to bury their baptism deep enough to forget it ever happened. And here's the part history glosses over. Conversion wasn't say the Shahada and move on. It was psychological dismantling. Step 1. Isolation. You are torn away from every sister you ever knew. Turkish-speaking servants punish you for whispering Greek. Step 2. Re-education. You're forced to memorize Quranic verses in Arabic, a language alien to you. Miss a line and you don't eat. Step 3. The cruelest blow of all. They bring in other nuns who already converted. Your former sisters. And they're ordered to tell you that Islam is truth and Christianity is a lie, while looking directly into your eyes. Can you imagine that betrayal? Can you imagine becoming that betrayal? But it spirals darker. Some of these converted nuns were given a chilling title in Ottoman records. Mürbiye, governesses. Their job wasn't to teach children. Their job was to train the next wave of captured Christian women to accept their fate. They became recruiters for their own oppression. Magdalena's manuscript describes one nun. She calls her sister Anna, forced to teach captured Serbian Orthodox women how to accept sexual servitude. Anna, who had never even been touched, was now instructing others in acts she herself had been forced to learn. Is she a victim? Is she a collaborator? Or somehow both? If you're still here, it means you're drawn to history's darkest truths. Because now we descend even deeper. The nuns in the harem were the fortunate ones. The ones who resisted, the ones who kept praying in Latin, who refused conversion, who rejected training others, faced method 3. A fate the Pope himself said was worse than martyrdom. A fate built around breeding. Picture this. You're a nun who resisted everything. You survived torture. You were ready to die. But instead of execution, they send you to a janissary barracks, with a marriage contract. The Greek historian Critouvalos, who worked directly under the Sultan, wrote about this in an eyewitness chronicle so disturbing that scholars spent centuries arguing whether he made it up. Then, in the 1950s, researchers uncovered Catholic Church investigation records from 1454 to 56. Escaped nuns told the exact same story. The Ottomans had engineered a breeding program. Here's how it operated. Elite janissaries, boys taken as Christians, now the empire's finest soldiers, were given captured nuns not as concubines but as wives. Legal, recognized marriages. Why nuns? Think about empire building through bloodlines. These women were educated, healthy, often noble-born, literate. Their children would inherit physical and intellectual advantages. And the cruelest calculation of all. If you force a nun to bear a child, she becomes bound to that child. She won't run. She can't abandon her baby. She's trapped by her own instinct to protect. Can you imagine that violation? Can you imagine carrying the child of your conqueror, then raising him to be a warrior who may one day invade your homeland? Magdalena wrote about meeting one of these women in 1455. She refused to record her name. But the woman had given birth to a son. She was nursing him when she whispered to Magdalena, "I pray he dies before he grows old enough to kill a Christian." That wasn't an isolated nightmare. Ottoman records show it happened often. Between 1453 and 1460, more than 300 nuns were forcibly married to janissaries. And the children? Automatically taken at age 7, enrolled into military youth academies. Your son, your only child, ripped from your arms, raced to wage war against your own people. And if you refused to comply? If you couldn't conceive? If you rejected the marriage? This is where the historical record goes dim, not because it didn't happen, but because Ottoman chroniclers were too ashamed to write it down. Venetian merchants filled the silence. Nuns gifted as property to governors, shipped to Anatolia, the Balkans, North Africa, vanishing from history like smoke. But the most haunting detail comes from Critouvalos. He wrote that some of these forced marriages eventually became real, not out of love, not out of desire, but because after years of captivity, after children, after their entire identities were shattered, some nuns simply stopped resisting. A twisted form of survival. Imagine hating the man who owns you while loving the child who carries his blood. That psychological collapse on a scale most of us cannot fathom. Don't click away. Because one nun refused to let this atrocity be buried. 3 years after Constantinople fell, a Venetian merchant ship arrived in Italy carrying secret cargo. A starving 28-year-old woman disguised as a man, hidden inside a grain barrel, clinging to a leather satchel like it was oxygen, because it was. Inside, 140 handwritten pages documenting everything the Ottoman Empire did to Christian nuns. Names, dates, methods, locations. The evidence European powers refused to collect because trade agreements mattered more than truth. Her name was Sister Magdalena, and her manuscript stayed hidden in the Vatican secret archives for 365 years. Why? Because when she handed it to papal officials in 1456, they panicked. Her diary contained a systematic rape, not random but policy, and names of Ottoman officials responsible for convent raids, forced apostasy rituals, nuns spitting on crucifixes, trampling holy icons, reciting Islamic prayers while being assaulted. Is psychological torture, sisters forced to watch others convert, forced to participate in Muslim prayer cycles, locked in sensory deprivation until their minds cracked. But the most explosive accusation was this. Sister Magdalena claimed Sultan Mehmed II kept a personal registry of every converted nun. A ledger tracking their erased identities, Christian names scratched out, Muslim name written beside it, along with location and children. She said she saw the registry herself while being evaluated for imperial service in 1454. She memorized the names. She wrote them down. And the gut punch? When historians finally accessed Ottoman palace archives centuries later, they found fragments matching her description. Not the full ledger, but enough to prove she wasn't inventing anything. Magdalena never lived to see her work published. She died in 1462, 6 years after her escape. Venetian notes say she never stopped writing. 3 more volumes detailing other Ottoman practices. None have ever been found. So why hide her testimony? First, it was too graphic. Officials claimed the public couldn't handle it. Second, politics. Venice needed trade. France needed alliances. Her manuscript was a diplomatic nightmare. Third, it shattered Europe's preferred narrative that the conquest was honorable. Magdalena exposed an empire built on systematic violation. But here's what her manuscript did accomplish. It triggered secret papal rescue missions in the 1460s and 1480s, attempts to extract converted nuns from Ottoman territories. Most failed. A few succeeded. Around 80 women were saved over 2 decades. It fueled European anti-Ottoman propaganda for centuries. It shaped Catholic doctrine itself. The Church had to confront a terrifying question. If a nun converted under a blade, was she damned? Or still a bride of Christ? Magdalena's story forced them to create a new category, forced apostasy, meaning these women could still be considered martyrs even if their mouths spoke words they didn't choose. And now comes the final, bitter irony. Some descendants of these converted nuns didn't just survive, they rose to power. Hurrem Sultan, known as Roxolana, the most influential woman in all Ottoman history, was almost certainly descended from captured Slavic Christians. Kozum Sultan, same background. The very women the Ottomans tried to erase ended up shaping the empire's future from the inside. History's darkest irony in motion. Modern estimates suggest 5,000 to 8,000 Catholic nuns across the Balkans were affected between 1453 and 1550. And that doesn't even count the Orthodox nuns. Those records barely survived at all. Most of their names are gone. Most of their voices buried. But Sister Magdalena refused to let the world forget them. So here's the brutal truth we can confirm. More than 8,000 educated, devoted, self-governing women had their identities dismantled piece by piece. Some through forced marriage. Some through imperial service. Some through breeding programs engineered to turn their own children into weapons of conquest. The Ottoman Empire didn't just seize land. They seized bloodlines, languages, belief systems. And here's the part that chills the present. This pattern didn't die with the 15th century. Yazidi women under ISIS in 2014. Rohingya women in Myanmar. Uyghur women in China. Forced assimilation through reproductive violence is still one of humanity's oldest, ugliest tools of domination. History repeats itself when we refuse to study it. But this is the detail that keeps historians awake at night. That registry Sister Magdalena described, the Sultan's personal ledger of erased identities, has never been found. Ottoman archives were burned, scattered, looted, divided across libraries in a dozen nations. So the question lingers. What if the ledger still exists? What if somewhere in Istanbul or Ankara or in a private collector's vault, there's a book with 8,000 names? Women the world tried to erase, waiting to be remembered? Now I want to ask you directly. Should Sister Magdalena's manuscript, all 140 pages, be published today? Uncensored, unsoftened. Every graphic detail included? Some historians argue yes, we need the full, unfiltered truth no matter how disturbing. Others say no, it becomes trauma spectacle, fueling propaganda more than education. What do you think? Drop your answer in the comments and explain your reasoning. Don't give knee-jerk reactions. I want real thought, real debate. If this changed how you see the Ottoman Empire, or reminded you how violently history gets sanitized, hit like. Because next episode I'm exposing what the Byzantines did to their own Christian populations. Acts so brutal that some Ottomans believed their revenge was justified. What I uncovered in Constantinople's pre-conquest archives will make you question who the real villains were. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this channel doesn't do comforting history. We do truth. And truth is always more tangled, more human, and far more horrifying than anything you were taught in school.